Can everyone hear me? Okay. Let me start off by saying thank you all for coming to the 2026 IMCA Dinner. It's great to see you all. I hope you're all full. There's still plenty of pizza, so feel free to help yourself. I'd like to introduce, we're going to get started with the speaker, and then we're going to do all the other customary stuff afterwards. So to introduce our speaker, we have Twink Monrad today. Twink moved to Tucson when she was 2 years old. In the 5th grade, she attended a gem and mineral show in her school cafeteria. That school cafeteria gem and mineral show grew over the years and became the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show that is now everywhere. So in 1976, Twink and her family moved to the Oro Valley, where she became friends with Jim Kriegh. After Jim retired from the University of Arizona, Twink and Jim and their friend John Blennert began rock hunting, and eventually, you'll hear the story. You'll hear all about it. All right. So without further ado, Twink Monrad.
Here we go.
Okay. What I'm going to do is read how this happened to keep it straight, because it was 30 years ago. And so you'll understand the story, and then I'm going to show 45 pictures from our photo album, followed by an 8-minute video that I think you'll enjoy. So you ready? Okay. Okay. After retirement as a professor of civil engineering at the U of A, Jim Kriegh started the hobby of metal detecting for treasure. In 1995, he discovered a huge meteorite strewn field, and I will tell you how all this happened. Starting in the early 90s, I began going rock hunting and metal detecting with Jim Kriegh and his friend John Blennert. We had previously joined the Desert Gold Diggers Club. During the September 1995 meeting, a scientist from the U of A Lunar Planetary Lab was the speaker. He was Dr. David Kring. He said that while we were all out looking for gold with our metal detectors, that we should keep our eyes open for meteorites. And he brought a few to show us. And then the meeting went on. Okay, in November of that year, John, Jim, and Christy, Jim's dog, went to a place called Gold Basin to look for gold. At Gold Basin, the Gold Club had several claims, so all the Gold Club members, many of them went up there year after year. They've been going there for years. And later I'll tell you the funny thing they said. And this is in northwest Arizona, near Lake Mead. It's between Kingman and Lake Mead. While there, Jim, who listened to the speaker, noticed some brown rocks which sounded like gold, but were not gold. Remembering David's talk, he brought some of those home and took them to show David at the U of A. David said, "Those are meteorites. Are there any more?" Jim said, "Yes, I think they're all over the place." David said, "Well, if that's true, this is a really exciting discovery." So Jim and John and Christy went back and brought more to show David to prove that there in fact were more. Then David asked them if they would be willing to volunteer to map the strewn field for 2 years in secret, so the field would not be disturbed by those meteorite hunters. Jim and John said yes and asked if a third person could be on the team. That was me. So I was invited and accepted. We were told not to tell anyone about this discovery. As I said, they didn't want the field disturbed. We agreed, and the adventure began. Jim bought a large RV for this project so we could all stay out in the middle of the field for a week at a time. We completed our 2 years of hunting, and at the end of the 2 years, we had mapped the field 6 miles by 12 miles. It's larger now, with other hunters going farther and up more hills. The Lunar Planetary Lab was very happy with Jim's map, which he did. He just did it on a topo map with a pencil and pen, and I have a copy of his map on the table you can look at afterwards. Because the Garmins were around, but nobody had phones, and they were happy with the way Jim did it, so that's how he did it. The university studies showed that this asteroid was the size of a small car, maybe large, we've decided, because there were pieces all over the place. We found that at least 65% of them were buried, so we had to dig many out of the ground. And this was fun because we had heavy hand picks with strong magnets attached. When we dug a little, the meteorite would jump onto the magnet and make a really nice click. That was fun. A test showed that the meteorite fell 15,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age, and the nomenclature committee named it Gold Basin. In February 1998, during the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, 98, the U of A announced the discovery to the public, and all of the meteorite dealers, hunters, authors of books, collectors, and scientists wanted to meet Jim Kriegh. They were all here for the Gem Show from around the world, and they wanted to trade their meteorites for Gold Basin ones we had. So all three of us gained large collections that first year and the second year. Those who were hunters wanted to join us in the field, and for many years after that, we had further adventures showing folks how to hunt at Gold Basin, and we had lots of good times. Since Jim Kriegh's death in 2007, I remain in contact with the meteorite world via the internet and IMCA and the Gem Show. And actually, John passed away in the last 2 years also, so I'm the only one of us three left, so I'm trying to keep the story alive. After I finish talking in a minute, I have a collection of color photos to show you from my photo album, which I hope you will enjoy. Since this is about the whole adventure, you will not only see meteorites, but also the beautiful scenery at Gold Basin, a high desert plateau near a Joshua tree forest. And after that, I would like to show an 8-minute video that was taken in 2003 of Jim, John, and me. And actually, the fellow that did it went around the Gem Show in 2003, went in people's rooms, so there are lots of interviews, but I'm just bringing our interview. So Dr. Larry Lebowski, that all of you probably know, a planetary scientist, is with us today in case you have any real questions. I just know how to find meteorites. Oh, and up on the table in front, when we're all through, if you have a minute, I have my favorite meteorite that you will see in a picture. I have a puzzle piece that John Blennert at night would sit in the RV and glue together, because if we found a pile of chips that looked like they went together, we'd put them in a bag. So the big one on the left is all glued together. You can see that. And Jim's map. And some of the meteorite hunters had a 20th anniversary hunt at Gold Basin, and I went, and I know the Bowlings went that are here tonight. So there's a picture of that. And all this time, David Kring kept saying that there should be basketball-sized pieces of meteorite either in the lake or beyond the lake because of the way the field was aimed. And sure enough, about just before that 20th anniversary, about 10 years ago, some hunters did go down from Mesquite, Nevada, and found them in the southern tip of Nevada. So they brought a basketball-sized meteorite to that 20th anniversary, and there's a picture of one of those on the table too. So when we're ready for photos, I can talk about those. This sign was there when we started in 1998. The sign looked just like that, but in the ensuing years, it has fallen down. So that's your entrance to Gold Basin. Now that's a gold nugget and 2 Gold Basin meteorites. So that gold nugget is about 1.5 inches tall, and Jim Kriegh and I were walking down a sandy wash together, and he said, "Oh, I think I hear a really big meteorite." So he said, "Why don't you dig it?" So I got down with my magnet and my pick, nothing jumped up, so I used my hand, and it was that gold nugget. So we found it together, and it's gorgeous on the piece of quartz.
Do you want me to just go through them in the lousy order?
Sure, I'll just describe each picture. You wouldn't know what order they were in, would you? Yeah.
No, I wouldn't.
That's fine.
So we're back to the spiny.
Okay, this is a high desert plateau, so the cactus up there have extra fur to keep them warm. They're different from our Sonoran style cactus. Here's a picture, maybe to show how hard they are to see if the sun isn't right. So you can see the turquoise or the triangle toward the center, bottom right center. So that is why you really need a metal detector if you want to be sure of finding all that you can find. Some are obvious, brown sitting up, but most of them are like that or buried. And this was our camp.
It looks just like Breaking Bad.
Yeah? I was fortunate enough to find a different one up there, and as you can see, or you will see if you see the gold basins on the table, they're all kind of the rusty brown color because they're oxidized. But this was almost black, so the U of A did not do a study on the age as to when it fell, but it's obviously a fresher fall, and they named it. It got a different name of Golden Rule, after Golden Rule Peak, which is nearby. This is another large one that we found that had interesting streaks on it, like flow lines. At night in the RV, Jim and John would sit there and weigh every single one and make an index card for every single one and put down the location so the U of A would know in each little bag where it came from. This is one of the beautiful sunsets. Some of you may remember that Michael Blood used to have an auction every year, and I always had a cake made for the auction, and I would have the person who made the cake, I would wrap about 25 gold basins in aluminum foil and have her put them in the cake, so people eating the cake, 25 people would get a gold basin meteorite in their cake.
Hey, Twink,
Yes.
how many people in the room have one of those Gold Basin meteorites from Michael Blood auction?
Wow, neat. Thanks, that's interesting. One of our first visitors up there was Richard Norton, and this is one of the pictures he took of Jim. This is the gorgeous Joshua Tree Forest I told you that was nearby. Where we were hunting wasn't that thick, or obviously we wouldn't have been hunting there, but this was up the road. It was so pretty. There I am with my Gold Master. We all three of us used Gold Masters almost the whole 2 years, but toward the end of the 2 years, John Blennert bought a mine lab, so he could smugly walk around the bushes and hear them above the bushes. So we had to go under the bushes with our Gold Masters to try to find them. And here's a pretty fire barrel they have up there that we don't have down here. Another Richard Norton photo. And this was taken by a friend in Tucson later. Some more of that pretty fuzzy cactus.
Who has the gold nugget now?
Jim gave it to me at some point, so I have it in my safe.
Excellent.
And here's a picture of, if the sun is right, you could see the Gold Basin meteorites, but they certainly always didn't look like this. Jim's trusty dog, Christy, walked around with us, and of course I made an astronomy scarf for Christy. But she was walking around with us doing what we were doing. You'll see pictures of her later. It looks like she's looking for meteorites. Mark or Dad, I don't remember if you knew what this building was, but it was there for years, and I'm not sure if it's still there. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
It's 9 inches outhouse.
I guess so. This is a meteorite that sort of had the shape of an arrowhead, but it's not. It's a meteorite. This is the sunset near our campsite. So we saw that Joshua Tree over and over in the gorgeous sunset. This is my Golden Rule with the cut side shown after got it back in Tucson. Well, after it was announced to the public, as I said, lots of people wanted to come and hunt with us. And one time Bob Hagg brought some friends from Utah, and I'm not sure who else is there, but you may recognize some of them. But I see Bob with a white t-shirt on the right. So we'd spend a few nights there and cook dinners and everything. It was a lot of fun. Okay, this again is in the RV. Every night Jim and John would weigh them and put them in a bag for the university. We stayed for a week, and we'd always take one afternoon off just to go sightseeing. So this is a pretty shot of Lake Mead back when it had more water in it, I guess, huh? And there's Christy looking, we don't know, looking for meteorites maybe. Only one day out of all the times we went, only one time did it snow. And I remember Mike Farmer and the dentist from Sierra Vista and his son were there. So we all went in the RV and played cards or something for 2 hours, and then it melted and we all went back out hunting. There's John Blennert. Another fuzzy cactus. Jim and Christy. Joshua trees we discovered do not bloom every single year, but when they did, they were like this. They were gorgeous. Because we went up there well, Jim lived for 12 years after the find, so we went up 11 and a half years after it was open to the public, with other people usually. Gold Basin. Here's a typical find. You'd come back to the truck. We'd come back to the truck every couple hours and unload our stuff and then start walking again. And we'd move the truck around. That's how we mapped the 12 miles by 6, just by trying different areas and different roads. But there you can see two gold nuggets, and that one, the one on the left with the hole in it, I kept telling John Blennert how much I liked it, so he finally gave it to me, so I still have that in my safe with the other one.
Is that a coin in there?
Yes, that's a quarter, just to show size, yes. Maybe it's a dime, can you tell? Yeah. Yeah, because that gold piece isn't very big. One of our friendly critters. And this is my favorite one that I found, and it's up on the table. I actually walked back to the truck 1.5 miles to get my real camera because we didn't have phones with us. But I thought it was so pretty, I walked and got this picture. So 1.5 miles each way. And this is the evening routine doing the meteorites. And this is when, in the center is Dr. David Kring. He came up maybe 3 times during the 2 years just to see how we were doing. And he'd camp out in his little yellow tent and bring up steaks usually. And so we'd have a nice steak fry when he was up there with us. And there's that pretty gold that was found in the wash. Yeah, on the sides of the quartz, it looks like it's dripping down there. It's really pretty. And I don't know if some of you I know Suzanne Morrison. This is her first meteorite, so her big smile. There's John doing the meteorite work. And this is that same snowy day. Well, I always kept our table decorated with a meteorite and some flowers. Yeah, pretty view. And there's John with Christy. This must have been May. Those started blooming in May up there.
That's it.
Okay. Now we have the 8-minute video of John, Jim, and me in my backyard in Oro Valley.
We are privileged to be here today in Oro Valley, Arizona, just north of Tucson, with the original finders of the Gold Basin Strewnfield.
First became interested in meteorites when I listened to Dr. David Kring from the University of Arizona Lunar Planetary Lab discussed meteorites at a Gold Club meeting which I was attending. It became quite apparent after listening to him that I may be able to hear meteorites with the metal detector that I was using to find gold. So I started paying attention to the hot rocks, rocks that we often found, threw away, but I started saving these rocks and looking at them a little longer. The first meteorite that I had found was actually one I found down in Graterville when I was looking for gold that was identified by Robert Haig. And upon cutting it and seeing the metal inside, I had some idea what to look for. So later on, John Blennert and I were up with a friend up in Gold Basin, Arizona, which is northwest of Kingman. I started saving the hot rocks. In cutting these Gold Basin and seeing two of them were potential meteorites, David Kring said, yes, they are, and we started wondering if there were two, if there were more. So John and I headed back up to the Gold Basin area and started looking again for gold and meteorites, and we kept finding a few, not too many, but as we moved in one direction, which was east of where we were, we started running into a lot of the meteorite rocks, and we learned to start recognizing those rocks.
We stumbled on the realization that people were complaining about the pesky hot rocks up there, and that was why the area was not so much favored for hunting nuggets. And as we started hunting around, we'd find a little group of potholes, and it was kind of interesting to find all these meteorites stuck down in the holes or up on the lips, or we started finding that they'd dig them out of the holes and drop them into the nearby bushes, and it was kind of a little gold mine for Jim and I and Twink, finding these things in other people's detector digs. It was pretty cute.
After John and I went back and discovered, yes, there were more meteorites, Twink Monrad joined us, and we started looking for the meteorites and trying to do what David Kring explained to us that he wanted us to do, to try to map the potential Strewnfield that existed from these Gold Basin meteorites. So we started keeping tracks of the location. We measured how deep we were finding them, and just in general expanding the area, advancing the area until we had learned that this meteorite strewn field was over something like 15 miles long and 5 miles wide. And today we know it's bigger than that. It's a lot larger than that. But we will never determine just exactly what the boundaries are because of geological restraints.
After Jim and John ascertained that there was a Gold Basin meteorite field, I was invited to start going along with them and help map the field for the University of Arizona. Unfortunately, I was brand new at metal detecting. After I got fairly good at finding the Gold Basin meteorites, I was actually lucky enough to find two different meteorites in the strewn field. The first one was the Golden Rule, which was an L5, and then I discovered another meteorite which was named Golden Mile, and it's an H4.
I'm going to look at some of my notes that I took and made when we were actually finding the meteorites. And I noticed on my 8th trip that I had found 129 pieces that totaled 6,430 grams. And then a few times later I'd found 140 pieces. They totaled 3,369 grams. So as we expanded the field, we run into areas where the meteorites were obviously just scattered all over the given area, and we were finding a lot of the meteorites. Another one where I found 79 pieces, but they only weighed 2,224 grams. This tells you that they were varying in size. We could find some large ones that would add up the total weight, or we could find a lot of relatively small ones.
After the announcement of the Strewnfield, we had multiple hunts up there where got to meet a lot of different gold prospectors and meteorite hunters. Got to expand out, and I know I tried to maintain a map for Jim for all the finds I had when I was up there with all the different hunters. It was kind of interesting trying to weigh these things and get everybody to cough up locations, because some of these guys get pretty secretive about what they were finding and where they were finding it. But we continued to log them for quite a while and try to compile the map, which is what David wanted. Got to meet some really, really interesting people all over the place. As time went on, we continued to expand the field. I like to jump out a pretty good distance and just see if I could bang out a half mile or a mile or a quarter mile sometimes even more, just to see where these things were at. It was kind of fun. Every once in a while you hit a void and I come back thinking, man, that's the end of the field, but just press on a little farther and you get back into them again. It seemed like there were little hot spots and little voids and pretty much the whole thing. I get bored hanging in the same spot too long. I just kind of like the thrill of the hunt.
After a time, we realized that many of the Gold Basin meteorites were fragmented and could be pieced together as a puzzle. Here's an example of one of our probably 500-gram meteorites, which was found in 10 or 12 pieces, and we glued it together.
You know, I just look and think back to the last few years, how lucky we've been to find this new meteorite Strewnfield. And as a result of all the people that we've met and how nice it's been to become associated and meet so many people.
I sure think these things are butt ugly, but after a while the nuggets were getting in the way of my meteorite hunting.
Another aspect of this has been watching so many of our people we've met find their first meteorites. Each of us found our first meteorite there, and even the scientist at the U of A working with us found his first meteorite with us.
So you can see what an exciting adventure it was for me, the Betty Crocker cookie maker of the neighborhood, got invited on something like this. That was wonderful. And so when you get a chance, you can come up to the table. And are there any questions for me or for scientist Larry Lebowski?
Yes. I'm wondering about the density of the Strewnfield. What was like the most stones you found in one day, if you remember, or something close?
Yeah, we each, on good days, we'd each come back with 50 or 60 meteorites. And we counted each the pieces, and the chips were a meteorite. And you saw Jim's little black book. I found 1,201 pieces up there while he was still keeping track. So he kept track of everything.
What's the secret recipe for your Gold Basins you used to make at ET?
Right, it's chocolate truffles. And I would just make chocolate truffles with melted cream and chocolate chips, but then I would roll them in cocoa so they look like dirt, like the real thing.
They were amazing, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I used to take truffles to every single deal or a little bag every year for probably 5 or 6 years. And then one year, E.T. asked me if I would just bring them to his room and put them in a big bowl, and everybody could come to his room and eat them. And I did that, and every year he'd give me a nice big NWA in payment for them. Okay, so it's very sad to have lost my friends, but I cherish meeting all of you and all the good memories. As you can see, I still love talking about it. It was really neat. I, as always, brought some NWA 69s and some Gold Basins on the drawing table, but I wanted to tell you that 2 of them, you'll see yellow labels in them, and that's because the first 1,000 that we found, David Kring and Dolores Hill went through them all and put them in bags, and so all the bags either said Hill or Kring, and I brought 2 of the Hill bags, so they gave a lot of them back to us, so anyway, the 2 with the orange paper in there are Dolores Hill. Name on them.
All right, so can we give a round of applause for our speaker this week? Thank you so much. It's really great to hear that story and for it to live on through, through our club and the people who were here during that time and experience that cake and all those, those adventures and those stories.